Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, so Owen, Chester, two Pauls, and Winnie, guests, speakers, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the first World Internet Security Summit 2014. This is the first time, and we want to do it annually. So I'm Peng Wong, Secretary General of Internet Society Hong Kong. So today's event is hosted by Internet Society Hong Kong, co-hosted by Professional Information Security Association and Cloud Security Alliance Hong Kong and Macau chapter. On behalf of the host, I would like to send the warmest welcome to all of you to join our today's event. Hereby, special thanks should be given to our sponsor and partners, Cyberport and other networks. Also, we should thank all these supporting organizations, and including Office of Government Chief Information Officer. Of course, great thanks must be given to Cyberport for the great venue for the food and the support to make this event happen. So to kickstart today's event, I would like to invite the host, Mr. Chester Song, Chairman of Internet Society Hong Kong, to give a welcome speech. Mr. Song, please.
Good afternoon. Owen, Winnie, the Pauls, Paul Bixie, Mr. Paul Metropopis, and Mr. Li Xiaodong, all the way coming from, well, Paris, US, and Beijing, and of course our local speakers, the Port Authority, Hong Kong Police Force, as well as Hong Kong Internet Registration Corporation, CERT, etc., etc. So I don't think it's necessary for me to talk anymore about how important internet security is to every one of us, and I think it's only our greatest honor to have two truly pioneers of our internet, or to be in Hong Kong and to be speaking to us about DNS and how how that would affect us in terms of internet in general and security. Without that, we all know the internet without DNS, internet would just be a bunch of networks and machines connected to each other without much meaning at all. So I guess you're not here to listen to me, so I'll end here, and thank you all, and enjoy this afternoon's events. Thank you.
Thank you, Chester. Now, may I invite our guest of honor of today's event, Mr. Owen Wong, Chief System Manager, OGCRO, HKSAR Government, to come on stage and give an opening remarks. Mr. Wong, please.
Well, Chester, Paul, Winnie, and Ping. Well, distinguished guests and ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It is my great pleasure here to join you all at this World Internet Security Summit 2014. I understand that this is the first summit organized by the Internet Society Hong Kong. I congratulate their effort. Hong Kong has a world-class ICT infrastructure and an open, competitive, and relatively safe cyber environment. There are currently over 200 internet service providers offering various internet-related services in Hong Kong. The Hong Kong Internet Registration Corporation Limited, HKIRC, designated by the Hong Kong government, is providing registration, resolution, and related service of over 271,000 internet domain names under the .hk country code top-level domain. Well, over the past few years, cyber attacks have been increasing in frequency, which we all know. Some of these attacks only aim to paralyze the victim's network, their operations, and some to deface a website in order to arouse some public attention. Well, some attacks were of specific purpose, of course, including stealing information or building up a botnet. This year, Hong Kong experienced a few large-scale cyber attacks. For the incident taken place in June, which you all have interest in, the distributed denial of service, or DDoS as a jargon, with massive traffic volume targeting a website, have drawn public attention and raised concerns over the capability of Hong Kong in defending cyber attacks. In October, a series of prolonged and persistent cyber attacks against Hong Kong websites were noted. The hackers launched various attacks, including web defacement, network intrusion, DDoS attack against the websites, not only to the public organization, but also the private sectors. The hackers even developed one-click DDoS attacks to invite people with no technical background to join in the attack. Well, the attacks have lasted for over 3 weeks, which could result in endless sleepless night for most of us, ending up with some good lessons for the parties concerned. The first lesson learned is that the massive traffic volume produced by DDoS and DNS-based DDoS attacks will not only affect the victims' networks or their service provider, but also the internet community as a whole. The second lesson is that some incidents were avoidable if the victims could have completed essential software patching and proper configuration management. So easy. The third lesson is that the responsibility of protecting the internet infrastructure rests not only with the service providers, but also the whole internet community, including the professionals in this room. We understand that when facing a large-scale DNS-based DDoS attack, the victims, including the government, is often left with limited defensive options. Well, we can, however, take appropriate technical measures to reduce the number of DNS servers that can be manipulated by the attackers to generate that massive traffic volume. Well, according to the Open DNS Resolver project, which you know much better than me, there are some 32 million resolvers on the internet. Among those, some 28 million pose significant threats, which can be mitigated by proper configuration. For information security practitioners, we should take the lead to protect the internet infrastructure. We have two major roles to play, if not more. On one hand, we should assure appropriate defenses are in place to protect our network from becoming victims of an attack. On the other hand, we need to learn and implement necessary techniques to prevent our DNS server or other computers from being used as part of a botnet and for launching attacks against other networks. In the internet world, helping others is helping ourselves. We need to work together towards a stable and safe cyber environment. Today, we have a valuable opportunity to learn from the experts on ways to protect the internet infrastructure and security of DNS infrastructure in particular. I wish you all a fruitful sharing. Once again, I would like to thank the Internet Society Hong Kong for staging this event. I wish this summit a great success, and for all our overseas guests, a memorable stay in Hong Kong. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Owen. Thanks. So up next now, may I invite our sponsor and key partner of today's event, Ms. Winnie Wong, Head of Marketing, Hong Kong Cyberport Management Company Limited, to say a few words. And welcome you all to Cyberport.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you. After big lunch, so I make sure you're awake, okay? And just in case, I know someone new here, just a little bit advertising. Cyberport is a digital creative community, and we have about 300 companies working here, large and small, aspects like IBM and Microsoft, and a majority is young startups here in Cyberport. Anyway, we all know technologies are growing fast and quickly, and it drives the economic growth and social activities. So when opportunity comes, as well as risk, right? So that's why in Hong Kong and in Cyberport, we promote a lot about technology development in Hong Kong with OGCIO and with many industrial society, association, and experts, and just like Internet Society, okay? And just in this year, in April, we partner with OGCL Government Office. We did the SC27, it's a big conference. And then also the Internet conference on the security. And we had very good response. About 400 people attended the events from all over the world, local and overseas. And after the event, we have 500 online visits. It tells something. It tells me that, or tells us, hey, people care. People care about security. People care about internet issues around us. So this is why I thank Ping Internet Society this afternoon. That's why we're here to learn, to hear about the experts, the best practice, and whatever, you know. I know tech guys are very shy, and I do hope you guys do more interaction, do ask a lot of questions because the experts are here. So exchange ideas so that you can learn. And I'm sorry that I cannot stay long because I need to rush to the government house for another meeting. But I do wish the event a great success and also an early Merry Christmas. Thank you.
Thank you, Winnie, but please stay because we have a photo taking section. So Winnie, so together may I invite Chester again, Owen again to the stage. And also I would like to invite our overseas speakers, fly over from US and China, to Paul Mokapetris, Paul Vissi, Sao Dong Li from CNIC, and me to join a good photo. The first one. Okay, so we have more because we have some great speakers from local. So may I invite Horace Lau from Hong Kong Police Force, CF Churi from Urban Networks, Ben Lee from HKRRC, Andy Beam from Airport Authority Hong Kong, Eric Fan from PISA, Roland Zhang from Hong Kong Sir. So let's take a good pictures with all the speakers. Thank you, all guests, and please be seated.
Thank you for coming. Nice to meet you. Thanks again.
Yeah, you are the next. Without further ado, let's have our first keynote speaker, Mr. Paul Vesey, designed and deployed DNS protocol extensions and applications used throughout Internet today. He is one of the inductees of Internet Hall of Fame 2014, organized by Internet Society. So his topic is DNS as a control point for cybersecurity. Thank you, Paul.
Good afternoon. Thank you for coming for what is at best an obscure topic, but I think it's becoming more important to think about the ways that DNS is related to security as far as the internet security. You can't get anything done on the internet without first having at least one DNS transaction. And as a result, good guys, bad guys, victims, police, everybody needs working DNS in order to understand their part of the internet crime problem and to participate. I've been studying DNS since, I think, 1993, thanks to Paul Makapetris for getting me into this. And I have been working on Bind for many years. So I used to be a software author. I've also written a number of RFCs. I eventually left the DNS field for the security field. For example, I started the first anti-spam company. It was called MAPS. This was a California nonprofit company, which was later sold to pay its legal bills. But it put me in mind of the ways that you can use the internet not only to attack people, but to protect people. And so when I finally did leave the DNS field, I left the Internet Systems Consortium, my nonprofit, about 2 years ago, in order to pursue security full-time. DNS was our first major area. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the general problem of internet security and how DNS relates to it. And then I will have some specific examples about what can be done. And I'm hoping that there will be questions. I could have phoned this in. I could have asked you all to read an online paper. Instead, I've come here hoping to have a dialogue with you. So let's talk first about the purpose and role of the DNS. The internet, although we see it on our screens, and we see it in terms of web pages, domain names, strings of characters, it's made up underneath of packets. These are sometimes called atomic data units. It's a group of bits that travel from some originator to some recipient, and they travel according to their IP addresses. And those IP addresses are just more bits. Now, you can build a lot of things on top of something like that, right? The internet has all these packets underneath that we don't see because we've built other things on top of it, like the web. And so the web is really a thin veneer on top of the internet. The web is also younger and smaller than the internet. And a lot of people don't realize that the web was not self-created, that it was simply an application that was added to the internet by some very smart people back in the late 80s, early 90s. But the most important overlay from my point of view is the DNS. Now, if the internet were a territory, the DNS would be the map of that territory. In other words, it wouldn't matter what was connected to the internet and how much resource, computing resource, content, movies, email. You could connect all kinds of things to the internet and have them as part of the internet territory, but until they're in the DNS, they're not findable. You can't reach them. I've mentioned a few things here on my slide about business-to-consumer web and business-to-business web and email and so forth. But what I want to really get everybody to think about is you're not typing in a domain name very often now, the way that we were all doing 5 or 10 years ago. Mostly you're clicking on a link on a web page somewhere, or you're using a search engine. And so the vast majority of people who reach things on the internet don't use DNS anymore, or so it appears. That's actually false. DNS is more important than ever, because when you click on that link in a web browser, you are actually causing somewhere between 1 and 500 DNS transactions to occur so that that web browser can then render the resources that you have asked for. And similarly, the search engines are only able to locate things on the web and build the index in the first place because everything on the web is connected using domain names. And so even though you're seeing domain names less and less as application developers get better and hide them from you, the actual internet and web experience depends on DNS more and more. So there's a two trend lines headed in opposite directions. Now, from a security standpoint, we're very lucky that DNS DNS is a fairly exact protocol. It's very easy to get it wrong. It's very easy to try and put something onto the internet and then somehow misconfigure your DNS and then have your resources not reachable or maybe not as reachable as you'd like them to be. And that's because it has a rigorous internal structure. Now, what that means is that if things on the internet are actually related to each other, then they probably have a relationship to each other in DNS as well. The most common feature of being related in DNS would be to be served by the same name server or by a name server that has the same IP address as some other name server. And those relationships are not always indicative of a real-world relationship, but they often enough are that we've started to use DNS relationships as a way to investigate real-world relationships as well as sort of web relationships. And I would also like to say that whois has become useless for security work over the years. It might be that it's been subject to whois privacy, or it might be that the domain name that you are investigating has no whois data at all, or it will have whois data that's clearly just random characters typed into some web registration form somewhere, or it might be the name and the address of a credit card holder where the credit card was stolen in order to get the money to register the domain name. But it's almost never going to occur that whois will help you find a criminal, because they're not going to put their name where it's that easy to find. So whois is useless, and whois privacy is the order of the day. DNS privacy is not possible. If you don't put the right information into DNS, then you're not on the net. And that's a distinction that I think is important. Now, criminal DNS is a lot like real DNS. I would have loved it if somehow the internet had been invented, and all of us who are not criminals could have marched into the glorious future of being interconnected with each other, sort of like in the original Star Trek TV series, where there was no crime and no garbage and no poor people and so forth, and it was all very sanitary and very shiny. That didn't happen. What happened is the criminals came along with us into the glorious future, and so in the early days, the internet, when probably only 2 or 3 of you, maybe myself and Mock and Pindar were using the internet, it was just academic people and people who had government contracts. And in those days, there was no crime on the internet. But when the internet went mainstream and essentially embraced all of society, all of human society, it really did get the entirety of it. And criminals, as it turns out, have made better use of the internet for being better criminals than we have made of the internet, either in being better non-criminals or in tracking them. So they get much more advantage from this than we do. And I'm here to stop that, essentially. That's one of my current missions in life. So what do I mean by criminal DNS? You might have a cheap throwaway domain name that was registered with a stolen credit card, or perhaps registered with Bitcoin or something like that. They have become so cheap that you don't need to worry about the cost of a domain name when you're planning to do some kind of crime. And you've also got a lot of registrars and DNS registrars and servers that cater to the criminal element. They are sometimes owned by the same crime syndicate who wants to get the domain names for the purpose of doing crime. And we do what we can to identify those folks, and we ask ICANN periodically to please revoke somebody's license for being a DNS registrar, because on the basis that all they seem to do is to sell to criminals. But nevertheless, there is a criminal element in DNS. There's a whole bad neighborhood associated with people who want to use DNS to do crime. And I mentioned about whois privacy earlier, or bad whois data. These are not instances of, this is not the DNS that Paul Makapetris thought he was creating, or that I thought I was extending. Really the idea was to let, consenting adults exchange information with each other at a new scale. The idea was to move human civilization forward. And again, we've taken the bad elements of human society with us. So Francis Bacon once wrote that nature to be commanded must be obeyed. So I have pirated his statement here to say simply that DNS is that way also. To be commanded, it must be obeyed. You have to follow certain rules. And once you follow those rules, then there are some interesting ways to catch you. So this is the most technical slide I have for you today, and I'm going to apologize in advance. There's very little you need to know about the way DNS works in order to understand my presentation, but it's all right here. Domain names are grouped together into zones, and you can think of a zone as being something like isoc.hk, and the names under it like www.isoc.hk, or COM or HK itself. Those are also zones. Every zone has some name servers, and those name servers are identified by name, the same way that a web server would be identified by name. And those names, the names of name servers, have some addresses. A lot of other domain names, like the names of web servers, also have addresses, but for the purposes of this slide, we'll just say that name servers have addresses. Those IP addresses are grouped together into net blocks. This is a block of networks that is adjacent, and it is a power of 2 in size. So you might have a net block traditionally that would be 256 adjacent addresses. And so you can tell the two IP addresses are related if they would be in the same block of 256 adjacent IP addresses. In other words, whoever is providing service to one address in that block is probably also providing service to the rest of that block. And finally, these domain names appear everywhere. They are the first real word that you see in every URL. So after the http:// that's a domain name. And after the @ sign in an email address, that's a domain name. And those are just two easy examples. Domain names appear everywhere. Okay, that's it. That's the technical part of today's talk. So in traditional DNS forensics, let's say that you have been attacked and you're trying to find out where they came from, who they are. Is there any recourse? Is there a way to find out who did it? In other words, accountability. Is there any way to either launch a lawsuit or a criminal complaint against the person who did it? Chances are no, at least on the surface, because all you're going to see is some domain name that they used in order to get possibly one of your customers, if you're in the IT department, to click on some bad link that then infected them with malware, and the malware fetched some other names. And all of these names are cheap throwaway domain names. They won't have who is, so they will tell you nothing. But it gets worse, which is if you do a lookup at the time of your forensic analysis and say, all right, what is this domain? What does it point to? Does it have an MX record for mail servers? Does it have an address associated? That kind of thing. You will only see the current value. And the chances are, if the crime hit more people than just you, that by the time you're doing your forensics, the domain name has been taken down due to a complaint against the registrar or the registry. So the fact that DNS will only tell you the current truth, and thanks to Dr. Makapetris, it does an excellent job of telling you the current truth for many billions of names and many hundreds of billions of lookups per day. It nevertheless only tells you the current truth. And what you need to know when you're doing forensic analysis is recent truth. We're going to get to that. But there's another way in which this gets worse, and that is when you do a lookup, the owner, the operator of the name server that's responsible for that zone will see your query. And so let's say that they were using a domain name that was somewhat targeted toward you, and it was only used against your company. That means that they can tell when you begin your forensic investigation of their attack against you by simply watching the query logs of their name server, because they know when they launched their attack, so they were expecting some queries at that time, and now they're expecting radio silence. And you're going to break radio silence by asking their name server questions about the name they used to attack you. And maybe you'd like your forensic analysis to be quieter than that, so that you do not expose your interest and your activity to the people you're chasing. So, I could say more bad things about who is, but I think I've gone far enough down that track. And as a result, largely of these problems, passive DNS was born. I'm going to explore that next. But first, let's talk about what we've done wrong in how we have organized ourselves as a security industry. And by security industry, I include academic, law enforcement, government, commercial, nonprofit, volunteer, every interest that has had any role in trying to create new tools or new methods for stopping crime has helped shape the current state of affairs. And so I'll give you an example, which is Spam Assassin. Spam Assassin is an open source tool. I use it. Well, most people do use it, or they use something like it, in order to filter their incoming mail. And the goal is to drop spam and filter out the spam and ideally not filter out the non-spam. You don't want false positives. It's good software, it's open source software, it's popular, and it has hurt us. And I'll tell you only one example of the many ways in which it has hurt us, which is that it has a rule built in, and this has been built in from the earliest days, where it scans the body of your email address or email text, looking for what's called a dotted quad, which is a raw, literal IP address that is not it's not a domain name pointing at an address, it's an actual, literal IP address. Because it turns out that only spammers do that. People who are not trying to deliver mail that that the recipient won't want are going to use domain names on any URL or email address that they include in that body. But spammers said, well, we don't want to have to get domain names in order to just to send spam. You know, so, domain names used to be somewhat expensive, and so they wanted to avoid that, so they used these dotted quads, and that meant that their spam did not get through. It was a spectacularly successful, short-lived filtering mechanism. So the next thing that happened was a race to the bottom, driven largely by spammers, criminals, you know, people who wanted cheap domain names, have helped us evolve toward a world where it's now a 30-second time delay between when you first indicate that you want a domain created for yourself and when it will be globally reachable. Now, 30 seconds is a very short time. Those of you who are in the registry or registrar business understand that that takes some doing. You actually have to change the way you write your software and the way you provision your data centers to get 30 seconds. My question is, what's the market? Is there anybody anywhere who is creating a legitimate internet resource, website, mail server, something like that, who, on the day they finally plan to launch it, finally realize, oh my goodness, I forgot to register a domain name, and I'm going to be out of business if I'm not on net in the next 30 seconds. No, that's not what happens. The people who are creating legitimate content get the domain name first, because if they can't get the domain name they want, they might not go into that business at all. Or at least they will make sure that they get all the domain names they're going to need for a certain content launch on the internet well before the day of the launch. So there really is only one purpose for a 30-second time to creation, and that is for somebody who wants to do crime. Nevertheless, it's a competitive environment. I remember when, I guess, Affilius and VeriSign are two GTLD operators in the United States, and they were competing, right? It used to be that you would ask for a domain name and it would be created within 24 hours. And then one of them said, I can take business away from you by reducing it to 12 hours. And the other one said, oh, if you can do it in 12, I can do it in 1. And then it was, 30 minutes and then 5 minutes. And finally we got to 30 seconds. I believe that there is some law of physics involved in that 30 seconds because they've all stopped there. You can often get it in less than that, but nobody will guarantee less than 30 seconds. But again, what I want to point out is that we as an industry created this race to the bottom. We created demand for domain names that would be created that rapidly and cost nothing and have junk whois data simply by creating tools like Spam Assassin that had rules like, oh, dotted quads means it's a spam. And nobody really thinks about that stuff. They're thinking, all right, so the water is currently up to my ankles and I'm bailing as fast as I can. I need a new plan before the water gets up to my neck. And then they add something like this to Spam Assassin. And so it was a rational act individually by the person who wrote the code and by each person who deployed the code. But the aggregate effect of all of those irrational acts is today's world. We helped build today's world. So one of the thoughts I'd like to leave you with today is, could we start thinking about what world we want to build and make a few not so short-term decisions about the things that we build and the things that we deploy, so that we can think about what would be the end result if everybody did what I'm proposing to now do for myself. Because it may be that that's a world you don't want to live in, and that you need to spend more money or accept more loss in the short term to avoid the longer-term, larger losses. So that's enough preaching. So Theodore Sturgeon once famously said that 90% of everything is crud. And what he was saying there is not so much that the world is a terrible place, but the definition of crud is, well, whatever is the bottom 90% of some category. And I will tell you, in my company, we see all domain names pretty much. And we see them as they're created. I'm going to show you an interesting program toward the end of this talk. And so I've had a chance to watch new domain creation in a way that no one in the world has ever had the instrumentation to do. And I will tell you that 90% is low. Well over 90% of everything that in the DNS is CRUD. And again, it didn't happen by accident. We helped that. We ourselves, the people in this room, me, people out there in the field with us, did this. Okay, so we can't prevent these domain names from coming into existence within 30 seconds. Too cheap to meter with bad whois. And so if we can't stop it from happening, we're going to have to evolve some strategies for coping with it. There now is a whole industry around takedown as a service, so that if you are, let's say, a brand holder and your brand is being infringed by some phishing site somewhere, you can either figure out who to call, what registry, what registrar, and figure out what time zone they're in, what language they speak, what is they want you to go to a website in order to issue your complaint, whatever, or you can just go to a company who's in the business of doing that takedown for you and say, here's a URL, it's abusing my brand, my logo, my this, my that, could you go take that down? And they'll charge you some fee, maybe by URL, maybe by the month, whatever it is, but there's a growing business for that. And in fact, in the Tokelo Islands, which is a protectorate of New Zealand, there is a top-level domain which is not very useful to the Tokelo Islanders. I might want to tell you, they've leased it to a fellow in Amsterdam who in turn sells domain names to spammers which are used as URL shorteners. So if you're used to things like bit.ly, this is simply like that except for spam. So I would say all of the names in .tk are useless except tcl.tk, which names an open source project. Nevertheless, he got so many complaints and so many of these takedown as a service companies were calling this guy in Amsterdam and saying, could you take this domain down? It's infringing against some trademark. And he always did it, right? He was always completely cooperative, but his phone was ringing off the hook. And the more business he had, the more his phone would ring. So he eventually developed a takedown API. And without paying him any money, you can sign a contract and get credentials for his API so that you, as a security company, can take down any of his domain names that you want. And you might say that's crazy, except from his point of view, that just means the people who created those are going to need more, and you can sell more domains that way. I'm down to my last 5 minutes, so I'm going to have to skip forward a lot. We're not going to be able to cover that. Let's stick to passive DNS. So I mentioned that traditional DNS forensics means that all you can do is look at a domain in real time and see its current value. Passive DNS is a system, as I'm demonstrating here, where you can find out the history. And so in this example, you can see that I listed my vix.com domain for sale in October of 2013. It's still for sale if you want it, but this is something, had I been a criminal, you might have said, well, if he changed his name servers in this way at that time, what else do I know about what was happening to him at that time? Can I use this information to somehow understand his situation better, draw a timeline, align it with other elements? In this example, we're taking a look at a net block. I mentioned that there are adjacent blocks at 256 addresses that are the prevalent size net block. You can have a lot of other sizes. The one at my house is that size. And this is an example of asking the DNS, what are all the names that have ever had addresses in that net block that end in vix.com? And again, had I been a criminal, it would be very useful to find out what other related properties I had using the same network address block. This is too obscure. Here's an example of finding all of the names that used my MX relay. That's a mail server. So this isn't just a security tool, this is a configuration management tool. If you forget what domains you own and you want to make sure that you don't bounce mail for any of them, here's a way to get the internet to tell you what domains you own, or at least which ones are pointing at your mail server. But again, if this were a criminal, and you started out only knowing about one of those domain names, and from that you learned the name of his mail server, to be able to use this tool to find the other names that also use that mail server is possibly a way to find other customers of the same gray market ISP or other criminal actions that are being performed by the same criminal gang. This is an example of the FBI's mail server, and I started out wanting to compliment them on how clean this was. Our database goes back to 2010, and this data has never changed. This is the complete history, from my point of view, of their mail service. But then I looked and I found out that by finding all of the addresses that pointed to into their NetBlock, all the names that pointed into their NetBlock, that I then had the ability to learn about all kinds of things that weren't their mail server. Now, of course, the FBI is not a criminal, at least not according to me, but had they been a criminal, this would be a wonderful way to find out. Let's say that they were using this for illicit web servers that were designed for credential theft or something like that. And you wanted to find out, all right, who are all the other brands that have been a victim of this type of crime by this particular criminal? This turns out to be hugely useful. So we make this available free of charge to individual law enforcement officers around the world. We also sell it as an API to law enforcement agencies around the world. Also national certs, if you're interested in this, please contact me. Last slide, no, one after this. If you're a programmer and you're concerned that my examples all show DNS notation, let me just assure you that's an artifact of my tool. The protocol itself is what you see on the bottom of this screen. It's a JSON protocol, RESTful queries, JSON results. So if you were to write software that incorporated this database into your workflow, this is what it would look like. And I want to say, although we invented this, we were the first people to come up with this idea with this type of web service. We've now written an internet draft. We've co-authored it with some people at the Austrian CERT. We want to make sure that everybody who has a system like this uses a compatible JSON schema so that one set of tools will work on every database that's like this. All right, so I'd love to tell you a lot more, but I can't. So let's just say quick questions. I have about a minute. All right, there's a question.
For about many years, I was representing Spam, which you guys use on that. You folks set up, for example, com.com, we took them down for about 2 weeks. Cena.com, we took them down for about 3 weeks. Criminal servers, access overseas, it's where they got rid of the criminal service. As those services have evolved, and as you say, put up maps, what do you think are the ways that DNSBL and others, I guess, have morphed or changed that maybe make society better, or do you think that we're in a worse situation?
I think DNSBLs were inevitable. I created the first one and I regret it, not just because I got sued a lot, but because I think we would have had a different outcome if the spam problem had been allowed to be worse earlier. But they were inevitable. There's no way to get people to not defend themselves. I think the new rules of the game are that you can't stop somebody by knowing what IP address they have, because they're just going to use a botnet. And it'll be, they'll send you spam from 50,000 different IP addresses, and it'll be a different 50,000 today. So no amount of investigation that you do today is going to change your long-term situation if that's your approach. So I recommend sending mail to Ping Wong asking for a copy of my slides, because I describe later on, it would take me another hour to get to, something called RPZ, which is Response Policy Zone. Spamhaus has one. And it's a good one, and I helped them build it. But this lets you poison things according to blocks of addresses shared by name servers or by name or by all kinds of different things. And I think that if we can step up our game with where we're capable of instituting the blocking, so it isn't just when we receive mail, but in this case, RPZ lets you block it at the time you're doing a DNS lookup. And if we can step up the kinds of things we can poison, in other words, not just IP address of mail sender, but also name servers, name server addresses, all kinds of things like that. And if we can get it out there in real time, in other words, just a matter of seconds between when you detect it and when you're defending your customer base against it, I believe we could significantly move the needle. And in that sense, DNSBLs will have done more good than harm just by leading us eventually in that direction.
Okay, thank you, Paul. We have a panel discussion and Q&A section at the end, so maybe you can take more questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. So up next, we have Mr. C.F. Chu, Solutions Architect, Arbor Networks. His topic is zero-day attacks, finding advanced threats in all of your data. CF, thanks.
I should get closer to the mic. Oh, that's fine. I'll just stay here. That's okay. Okay. My name is CF. I work for Arbor Networks. Today I want to share with you a little bit about what we know about the threat, what we know about security. I mean, just a little bit recap about who Arbor Network is. We have been in the security business for more than 10 years. When we first started, we worked with a service provider. We provided a system to detect DDoS and also help protecting the network infrastructure, and the customer against different kind of attack. Nearly about 90% of the world Tier 1 and Tier 2 service provider are our customer. Along the way, we see how the internet evolved, I mean the threat, especially the security threat that we have seen. It evolved from a one-dimensional DDoS attack or simple virus to something these days we have seen organized cybercrime and all different kind of things. And we also change a lot. I mean, in the industry, we try to cope with and actually learn more about this one. This infrastructure we call Atlas. We work with our service provider friends, partners, to collect statistics about internet, about attack, threat. There's few things we collect from this system. We collect DDoS attack statistic from the system that has been installed in the service provider. This allows us to understand who are being attacked, where the attack coming from, and how they did that. At the same time, we also start to put some device into the network of the service provider. They give a darknet address space. We install something we call a sensor, so that we can actually capture the actual activity between the infected device and the various hosts or device in the internet that talk to it. So we build sort of a global honeynet infrastructure. And the people in Arbor Network behind this is called the ACER. The ACER team. There's a bunch of researchers who actually spend the time looking at what happened, what activity in the internet, analyze malware. At this moment, we have probably more than 1.7 million dark IPv4 address space that we monitor. On the average, we receive about 150, 160,000 malware samples every day. So we have a lot of information to work with. And in fact, what I want to actually share with you is that what exactly we do in this area. And also, everyone here probably had heard about attack, advanced threat, and a lot of you guys, okay, as the one who responsible for the security of your organization, what should be the approach that you take to defend your network against various sorts of attack or threat? I think we saw it earlier on, the evolve and then how this threat had happened or evolved itself. We'll skip this one. And probably we read the news every day these days, not just about DDoS. We heard about 200, 300 gig of DDoS attack very often on the news. At the same time, we also see these organizations, this big organization like Target. Okay, Target has actually suffered from a point of sales attack, which millions of, it should be 40 millions of credit card information has been stolen. World Bank of Scotland has actually reported to actually set aside millions of pounds of dollars, okay, for some kind of compensation because of, okay, attack. And these are some of the things that we learn about business disruption, financial costs, and legal issues. So what exactly is this advanced threat? I think most of us understand what an advanced threat is. It's not just single attack we're talking about. It's not just a DDoS. It's not just one piece of malware. And what they try to do is that they have a specific target. They have an objective. And they actually is a bunch of well-organized criminal. They look for long-term control or compromised devices, and they make use of advanced malware. This line is a good one to actually, you saw this in a lot of vendor presentation, the cyber intrusion kill chain. It sort of summarized how this advanced threat thing happened. The first thing, typically recon. You try to understand or identify who your target is, who work for this target, how to get to know, okay, these employee work for this particular organization, want to attack where they like to hang out, what is that email address or conference information. And then you create your weapon. You design your malware. It could be something that you can put into a document or email attachment, or even something that you put in a USB and leave it somewhere at a conference so that people may be interested to pick it up. Delivery, how you deliver those things. Email, web download, USB. And then you also exploit vulnerability. Installation, C2, action. These are various kind of activities. Why we want to break it down in this way? Because now you start to see that there is a different step of process involved in this whole thing. If I want to detect something has happened, or I want to stop something, in fact, what we're trying to use the Q chain is that it's decided you want to delay this thing. If you're able to actually detect what happened at the time of the exploitation or installation, you actually prevent the action part. So you have to understand understand the various stages. At the same time, when you choose a solution, you also actually have to look at what that particular solution will help you, in what state, what it can do for you. So you see this one a lot in other vendors, not just us. Okay. I like to use this one as another way to illustrate the same idea that we have. It's all about the life of a malware in your system. It all started with you get infected. Somewhere inside your network, it doesn't really matter how you get infected. It could be I visit a particular website, order something, a window pop up, and I click yes, I confirm my order, and then I get something in addition to what I ordered. It could be the HR department in your organization receive an email and say that I'm interested in this particular post that you have posted in your website, and here is my resume. I'm sure they will be interested to take a look who you work for, things like that. So it doesn't really matter. You get infected somehow. And once you get infected, you see the various kind of activity that take place. Exploit, dropper, download. One thing is that along the way, you see various kind of communication happen inside your network and your outside world. Whether this is what? Is this a pointer? Not really. Anyway, whether it's a malicious site to download additional exploit key, whether it's the C2, there's something that happened, not just at the time that the malware get installed. There's a whole bunch of activity here. Now, what I'm trying to point out in this slide is that when you look at a solution, don't just focus on try to detect a malware from the email attachment or from a web download, because it might already happen inside your network. If you just look at the beginning of that process, of that queue chain, you might have missed a lot of stuff that happened inside your network. So we suggest that you should look at things at a slightly broader scope. Now, I want to turn to a different subject about Asia. So I mentioned about that, this infrastructure we call Atlas, where we receive malware sample, where we receive different kind of actual packet communication, conversation that had happened. All this get into the system, and then we try to crank the data and see what we're trying to do, or what we actually learn. The idea, the objective is to reverse engineering the malware, the threat. So when we get a piece of that code, what our researchers try to do is to understand how this happened. Reverse engineer that one. If I am able to actually get the actual protocol, what this piece of malware actually used to communicate, how this actually talk to other people, what it does, okay, which C2 it talk to, and especially a lot of time, these packets are being encrypted. And a lot of time, if I can find where the key is, then I'll be able to decrypt all the message, all the other piece of code that I collect along the way. And the goal is to reverse that. And also think about it, when I reverse that piece of code, that means I understand how it interacts with the other devices. Then I can try to emulate myself as a bot. I could try to register with the C2. I would sit there and wait for the C2 to send me down command and ask me to do what. And then I start to understand what they're trying to do. So this is actually very powerful. And we use this a lot. We collect all the data. But again, as I mentioned before, there's probably just too much activity happen in the internet and too much malware that you can look at. We tend to not try to look at every piece of malware in the world. We try to focus on campaign. We try to get various information about what's happening. For example, the point of sales activity we have seen. For example, a few years ago, the G20 summit, where delegates get email, spam phishing, and then they click on that one and get infected. And even the more closest one in the Winter Olympic Games, we actually monitor, we help the organizers to actually protect the infrastructure, particularly those video streams that actually update and provide results to the outside world. They want to make sure that no one is going to bring down the video stream service. Otherwise, it will be embarrassing. And we actually discover particularly a new kind of malware that target at the media infrastructure at that time. So we do that. We follow the campaign. We look at what happened, what people are trying to do, what information we collect, and then lead us to various kind of additional details, such as a honeypot output. We actually see that, okay, what we have collect. What's the time when this happened? Where is it? Who they talk to? We get the botnet infrastructure, so we understand where is the bot, along with like country code, AS number, what's trying to do. This particular family here, I just so happen to pick someone in that particular country. Doesn't mean anything anyway. Yep. And then what you see, we see the target type, the AS number, the host information. In fact, we use this a lot, and we also work with customer or different organization, different part of the world. I actually want to show you, I think this is the next slide. What we have actually did. This is something from Hong Kong we see last time. I think everybody aware that there's a lot of attack, okay, about a month ago. They started as towards some news media organization in Hong Kong. We actually start to look at what happened. We found out a few things. The first thing we found out is that, okay, there's a new bot being created for that purpose. And we call this the kernel bot Hong Kong, because it's a variation from an existing malware called the kernel bot, which has been in use a few years ago, which have seen very little activity recently until now, where they actually modify a little bit, it belong to the same family, and use that. The next thing we see from here is that, where are the C2? And what are the commands sent down? There's a script flood, there's like UDP flooding. Where are the target? And you see from here, the URL. This is particular some kind of video services that we have seen. So we collect all this information. Obviously, we can share this information with various organizations. We also put this information into our product. As I said, we want to understand all this malware activity, what they're trying to do. We put this, what this actually show, the monitoring activity. We look at a particular host. We try to understand what malware, what activity get involved in, and then how often. You see that graph, that line is actually representing frequency. How often I see these hold in these kind of activity. This help me to understand, that how bad this thing is. And we also put that intelligence into our product so that, again, we can detect abnormal activity by various way, by IP address, port number, URL, geolocation, and other things. And then this get feedback to our system. Now, go back to the question that we say. I'm skipping the slide a little bit because I know I get it only 5 minutes. Yeah. The style. This is from Gartner. Gartner, I think, is early this year. They have this what 5 style of defense against advanced threat. I think it makes a lot of sense. You say that you can look at threat in different locations. You can look at it from the endpoint. You can look at it at the payload. You can examine it, detect it at the network. And when you do that, you at least need to either have a way to detect it on a real-time basis, know something has happened. Secondly, when something did happen, you'll be able to go back and do forensic. You want to know what the impact is, what is the damage, what is the risk. And in fact, Gartner actually say that when you look at a solution or a defense, you need to have 2 out of this 5. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to have 2 systems. It could be 1 system, it could be multiple systems, but you have to have the capability to detect something at the various locations. At the same time, you have to have a capability to do forensic. Now, when we talk about forensic, this is what we say. We break it down to action, understanding, identification. But I want to focus a little bit more about understanding identification. Everybody has SIM, probably understand all this screen that something happened or something may have happened. You want to look at this lot of screen to go through. Zero-day threat, something happened. This is one of the vendor website. After Heartbleed had happened and they suggested all the customer how to find out whether this thing had happened before they have a signature. It involves about 12 simple steps. Maybe 30 minutes long, you take a PCAP from your system, apply manual signature, and then do a bunch of matching, things like that. But is this the way that we want it to be? How much time you have each day, how much time your security analysts have each day to analyze an event in incident? You want visibility. You want to detect what happened in the network. You want to analyze those impacts, particularly an attack timeline. When this happened, you probably have to go back 3 months, 2 months to see whether this had happened before. This is a incompatibility between the MAC and the window. What I'm trying to show you is actually an attack timeline. That capability you can run through. Imagine, again, I use the example. If you have 3 months of data, how you make sure that now have a new signature, and from this time, I can detect this thing, this particular malware. But what if, especially if there's 0 day, it happened 2 months ago? Do I have the capability to go back and look at what has happened? I need more than just IP address and port. I need packet information. If this device has been infected, who has been talked to, what kind of information has been exchanged? I want to be able to look back in history, particularly if an attacker uses a 0 day attack. I use Heartbleed example. I'm going to show you all this slide first because what I'm trying to do is that I want this one. The triangle here means a new signature. But in fact, 2 weeks ago, something has already happened. Now, if I do not have the capability and go back to look at what happened before, then I have to wait for the second time this event happened, then I know this has happened. You want to be able to have something that can help you to look back and look at the history. Look at what you have in the past to identify that this incident has really happened in my network. What is the impact? How bad is it? Who has talked to? What kind of information I look? And I know, I just want to leave you with the last slide here that we talk about, the enterprise leader. You can read that one. But one thing that makes sense is the team. As I was told yesterday by some of my colleagues from US is that some of the big organizations in the US who has outsourced a security solution in the past to other people had taken back the control. Why? Visibility. If I own a big retail store, I have 100,000 point of sales devices all over the globe, and they outsource to someone, I lose the capability, the visibility to understand what had happened. And that impact my business. So you should start to see that you have to think about this once we have all these different solutions, cloud, and then particularly about cloud, and what should I do with visibility? What is my defense approach? What is my incident response policy and things like that? I think I probably have to leave you with this slide in order not to use up too much of your time. Thanks a lot, guys.
Oh, thank you, Seth. Thanks. So, up next, may I now invite Mr. Xiaodong Li, Chief Executive Officer, China Internet Network Information Center, CNNIC, to come to the stage. His presentation is DNS Security Threats and Solutions. Xiaodong.
Thank you, Pin. Good afternoon, everyone. So I think publicly have a presentation about the DNS. So I also have a presentation about DNS, but I think today is not a DNS Security Summit. It's for the Internet Security Summit. So. But I didn't actually have a presentation about the generic DNS security issues. So I just give you a specific case study and what kind of solution that City deployed in last year. There is a security issue happened last year. We called that 825. Why 825 is because this attack was happened in August 25th. So there is in almost 1 year ago, there is a big disaster for Docian. CNIC is the registry for the national CCTRD, Docian, the China national CCTRD. So we have 11 million registration and almost 3 billion queries per day. But now there's so many hackers have a big interest how to attack Docian. But it never happened in the past 10 years, because there is only some small attack. But in last year there is a big attack for Docian. Actually, the attack is the hacker tried to stop the domain name IP info Docian. So this domain name is a domain for internet gaming. So that the internet game is a big industry in China. But it's very interesting that there's a lot of illegal internet game companies. So they try to build some website, but they have some competition between each other. So this RP.ca is a domain name from one internet company, but another one want to acquire this company with very low price. So they cannot be acquired. It's impossible. So they try to stop this site. So I think it's. The bandwidth for IP.ca is very large. It will cost very much to stop this site. So they choose to attack .cn. If they to attack .cn, that means CNNIC will find out methods to stop this attack. The first choice is try to stop this domain. That means this website will be disappeared. So in last year, in August 25th, almost in the midnight, everyone go to sleep, except for our administrators. So there is a big traffic. If you look at the pictures in the left side, so the traffic actually is not too much. It's about 12 giga per second, but 12 giga is much a lot for DNS queries. So it's almost 500 times to the average queries per day for Docian. So I'm sorry, I have no list point. If you see the left side there is some random label name, and then plus the rfinfo.cn. The hackers and the queries use this random domain name and try to send the queries.cn. Now it's a lot of traffic. Our administrator, the first choice is try to stop this domain name. But even we have a lot of node around China, but some performance of the node in different provinces is different performance and different benefits. So the traffic congest the bandwidth. And I think it's this attack, because in some province the queries is very slow, and then some queries failed. So the most infection in China is Sina Weibo, t.cn. They use t.cn as a short name. So and then so many Weibo account users cannot access the Weibo account. So it's a big issue for them to, and even for some younger people, they would like to chat with each other use the Sina Weibo in the midnight. So it's a big complaint in China. So almost about less than 3% of internet users was influenced by this attack. So it's just a case study, but I think it's a big disaster in China. So China is too big, and if it's 3% internet users, well, it's a lot amount of users. So it gives us a big pressure for .cn to how to improve the security. If saw some new attacks in the past 6 months, we do some analysis. Since this year, since June, there's a lot of such kind of attacks. Yeah, in the past 5 months, totally we have over 64 DDoS attack. Yeah, then the maximum peak query per second is 1.6 million per second. And it's a lot of traffic. It's much bigger than last year, but it never have influence because we extend our bandwidth for DOSIAN, and also we use our new device for anti-DDoS. Look, I think it's the tech always use even for among the 64 attack, the 63 attack used the random and the fixed domain name DOSIAN. They try to ask Cynic to shut down the such domain name, but there also another attack used for random top-level domain. Even for the last year for the 625 incident, they also use. Just look at this. It's rfinfo.cn. Actually, it's not rfinfo.cn. They use a .cn blank. It's a 3 character. Yeah. But if you look at the logs, you just recognize it's only .cn. But actually, it's not .cn. It's .cn blank. So and also they use in recent attack. They also use that kind of mechanism. If we do some analysis, the first 2 attacked domain name is for the internet game and e-commerce, because they try to shut down their competitors' website and then get the benefit. And also, for the e-commerce, and also for the Bitcoin, so I think it's very easy for them to attack the domain name system compared to attack the website, because so many companies invest a lot of money to improve their facilities for the website, but they ignore the protection for their domain name system. So that's why there's so many hackers. It's very smart try to attack the domain name system. If we look at this attack in last month, it's about 1.6 million query per second. That is Dianbaobao.net.cn. is actually is a e-commerce website. So, and I think this attack is a little different with last year. You know, not most of the traffic is overseas traffic, and you know, there's some hackers control some botnet. There's so many machines is from overseas, because now you know why they use this, because in China now they use the source IP validation, because it's a little bit difficult for the hackers to use the pseudo IP address. Now they try to control many machines outside China and to make the attack. But you know, now it's very, as I know that it's very cheap for the hackers to buy that some machines. You know, it's, if we want to have a 10 giga traffic, it's only about maybe 10,000 RMB. It's very cheap. So it's, now that is why just have 1 million RMB, you will have a big disaster for the whole internet. So I think DNS is a very critical infrastructure. So how to improve the facilities and the infrastructure is very important for the protection for this such kind of infrastructures. So you know, I think it's if we want discuss how to you know anti-DDoS. The first one is you need much more bandwidth, but you know it's not enough. You know, actually, if you have very large bandwidth, but if your DNS software is not efficient, it makes no sense for you to have more bandwidth. But now, you know, Cynic developed our own software. We call it SDNs. It's a series for different kind of softwares for domain name service. The SDNs -A is for the service for authoritative servers. So now the performance for SDNs -A is much better than the current popular DNS software. For example, BAN and ISD. Our software is almost maybe 10 times performance than current softwares. But this software is now only used for Cynic itself. That means we can use very you know less facilities to provide the same performance as before. And you know, there is a lot of traffic for DDoS attack, but then I think not every hacker is very smart. So they use a very simple attack mechanism to attack the DNS system. So we try to find the you know what kind of method they want to use, and then to embed the algorithm in our device. So look at the SDN-D is an anti-DDoS device. We use FPGA to improve the performance, and then put the logic into the FPGA. And now the commercial device, we can deal with the 4 giga for traffic for per device. Now there is testing for the device is 10 giga for per device. And you know, now for the device is a little bit expensive for some, you know, for some small DNS providers. So we also have another solution for the Zoom DNS. We use software solution. It's a totally software, no hardware supported, and have a very similar performance compared to the hardware. Of course, it's not very stable compared to the hardware. And you know, in China, I think it's a little different from other countries. You know, we only have 3 big ISPs. Yeah, even we have another 1,000 ISP license, but compared to China Netcom or China Unicom, is very small. So that means most of the recursive servers were supported by the carriers. So how to improve that is very important. So we try to find some solution and discuss with the carriers to improve the recursive server, and also to discuss with the registrars of .cn, because we have 100 registrars around China. I think most, maybe more than 90% domain names was hosted by the registrars. So we also have a collaboration with the registrars to improve their authority server. So THINIC is also providing a public recursive server. It's 1.2.4.8. It's just like the Google DNS. So we try to provide some solution for recursive server, for authority server, and also for some TLD database to make sure that we can provide a stable DNS service for the whole China internet. Of course, we also have another idea. Compared to the telecom network, internet is open. Of course, open is a key value for internet, but open is also the key value for the hackers. So how to make sure that the DNS can serve the internet very stable and very secure is very important. So we try to adopt the value for telecom network. We try to test if we can build a DNS-focused private network for the internet. That means, even that for a lot of recursive server, a lot of authority server, but less than 5% recursive server have the over 95% queries. So how to make sure that not too many recursive server work together with the authority server to provide a very stable DNS service is very important. So now we have a discussion with the three big ISP in China, try to build a private network for the DNS queries. But now it's only on testing bed. I hope that it will be next year I can give you more results for this testing bed. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Xiaozhong. Thanks for your presentation. So before a short break, now we have Ben Lee, Head of IT, HKIRC,